Black hotel maid answered a call in Dutch. Millionaire's reaction shocked everyone. She was just a hotel maid, invisible to most of the wealthy guests she served. But that night, something changed. While cleaning a penthouse suite, she picked up the ringing phone and answered, in fluent Dutch. The words rolled off her tongue with elegance and precision, startling the powerful millionaire who had just stepped into the room. His expression shifted from curiosity to suspicion. Why would a maid from a struggling background speak the language of European elites so effortlessly? What he demanded to see next would uncover a truth buried deep in her past, one that could change everything. For years, Amara lived in the shadows of luxury. She scrubbed marble floors, changed silk sheets, and polished crystal chandeliers for people who never even looked her in the eye. The hotel was a world, its golden hallways and extravagant suites a reminder of the wealth she would never touch. Amara worked tirelessly, her hands raw from chemicals, her feet aching from endless shifts. Yet she carried herself with quiet dignity. Behind her uniform was a woman of intelligence and grace, though no one in the glittering world of millionaires and diplomats believed a maid could be anything more. On this evening, the hotel glowed with celebration. A gathering of Europe's most powerful men and women filled the grand ballroom. Amara had been assigned to one of the penthouse suites, reserved for one of the wealthiest industrial magnates in the world, a man whose fortune built empires and influenced governments. When she entered the suite to tidy up, it seemed routine. The millionaire had not yet arrived, and Amara moved quickly, dusting surfaces and straightening pillows. But then the phone rang. She froze, unsure if she should answer. It rang again, echoing through the gilded silence. Against her better judgment, she picked it up. Her lips moved instinctively. Dutch, a language she had not spoken openly in years. Her voice flowed with a fluency that revealed a life far beyond scrubbing floors. She had learned it as a child, long before her life took a darker turn. At that exact moment, the door opened. The millionaire stepped inside, watching her carefully as her words in Dutch filled the air. And with one glance, Amara realized her carefully guarded secret was no longer safe. The silence after she hung up the phone was heavier than the ornate chandeliers above them. The millionaire stood in the doorway, his sharp tuxedo catching the golden light, his eyes fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. Amara lowered her gaze, trying to return to her duties as if nothing unusual had happened. But she could feel his presence behind her, a storm brewing. He was not just curious, he was calculating. For men like him, nothing slipped by unnoticed. The powerful often believe that every person had a place. In his world, a maid was meant to clean, not to speak the language of European aristocrats. Her accent was flawless, refined, almost aristocratic itself. It didn't fit. It didn't belong. And in his mind, it demanded explanation. Rumors spread quickly in hotels like these. Staff whispered that this particular guest was ruthless, known for humiliating those he saw as beneath him. He thrived on control, on power, on reminding others of their place. And now, Amara had unknowingly drawn his gaze. She continued wiping the glass table, her hands trembling, her thoughts racing. Memories of her childhood flooded back, the private lessons, the classical books in Dutch she once devoured, the father who believed she was destined for greatness. But all of that was taken from her the moment tragedy struck, leaving her family broken and her future stolen. The millionaire's silence felt louder with each passing second. She sensed he was not just curious, he was testing her, deciding whether to expose her or exploit her. When he finally moved closer, she could feel the weight of his presence pressing down. He asked her to stop. He wanted to see her, not as a maid, but as something else. Something she had fought desperately to bury. The other staff had no idea what was happening inside that room. They continued scurrying through the hallways, serving champagne and hors d'oeuvres to the glittering guests. But in that penthouse, a quiet battle of identities had begun. The millionaire asked questions, his tone sharp and deliberate. Each one chipped at the wall she had built around her past. Her answers were careful, but his suspicion only deepened. He wanted to know who she really was. By now, Amara understood what was happening. She wasn't just being scrutinized, she was being judged. To him, she wasn't allowed to be more than a maid. Her intelligence, her education, her voice in another language, these were threats. Still, she held her ground. Though fear coiled in her chest, a quiet strength began to rise within her. She had spent years hiding, but perhaps hiding was no longer an option. The millionaire leaned closer, his voice low, his eyes piercing. He demanded to know her story. And as his words cut through the silence, Amara realized the moment she had feared her entire life had finally arrived. The walls seemed to close in as Amara stood frozen, the weight of his expectations crushing her. He was no longer just a guest in the hotel. He was a symbol of every barrier she had ever faced, every judgment that had been cast upon her for the color of her skin, for the job she held, for the world she had been forced into. When he demanded to see her, she understood. He wasn't asking about her appearance. He wanted proof. Proof of who she truly was beneath the uniform. Proof of whether she was worth more than the role she had been forced into. And in that moment, something inside her broke free. She lifted her head, her eyes meeting his with steady defiance. The stories of her past poured out, not in words, but in the way she carried herself. The posture of a woman once trained in refinement. The grace of someone who had once danced in ballrooms, not just scrubbed them. The quiet fire of someone who refused to be erased. The millionaire was stunned. This was no ordinary maid. She was something he hadn't expected, a survivor of privilege lost, a woman shaped by tragedy but unbroken by it. And for the first time, he faltered. But the climax of this encounter was not his realization, it was hers. Amara finally understood that her silence had been her prison. By hiding her truth, she had allowed others to define her worth. Now, standing before the man who sought to diminish her, she reclaimed it. The room, once filled with golden light, seemed to shift. No longer did the chandeliers symbolize wealth she could never touch. Instead, they illuminated her strength. And in that moment, Amara transformed, from a maid cowering under suspicion, to a woman who demanded to be seen. The encounter ended not with triumph, but with quiet power. The millionaire, unsettled, turned away, realizing he could not reduce her to a role he had chosen for her. He left the suite without another word, but the look in his eyes revealed something deeper, an acknowledgement, reluctant yet undeniable, that he had underestimated her. For Amara, the aftermath was more profound than the confrontation itself. She had faced her greatest fear, the exposure of her hidden past, and discovered strength she never knew. She still possessed. For too long, she had allowed society's expectations to silence her, to keep her intelligence and heritage locked away. But that night, she had broken free. The other staff never knew what had transpired behind the closed doors of the penthouse. To them, Amara remained the same quiet maid, carrying out her duties with precision. But inside her, everything had shifted. She understood now that her life was not meant to be defined by her uniform, her skin color, or the assumptions of the powerful. Her fluency, her education, her grace, these were not accidents. They were pieces of who she truly was. The millionaire's suspicion had inadvertently reminded her of a truth she had long suppressed. She was not invisible, and she no longer intended to live as though she were. Her story became a silent testament to resilience. To every maid, every worker, every person dismissed because of their position or appearance, Amara carried their strength. She carried their fight. Because in the end, this was not just about a black maid speaking Dutch in front of a millionaire. It was about what that moment represented, the breaking of chains, the reclaiming of dignity, and the undeniable truth that worth cannot be erased by prejudice. And as the lights of the hotel ballroom glittered late into the night, Amara walked through its golden halls with her head held higher than ever before, no longer hiding, no longer ashamed, and no longer afraid of being truly seen.